In terms of Pine Ridge, let's talk about what makes this really significant. So, from what we see kind of on the map here, you're between two projects. One is from Cameco, which was their what is it, Smith Ranch?
Smith Ranch, correct.
Ranch.
There's a 5 million pound per annum licensed uranium mill at the Smith Ranch, which is currently under care and maintenance, I understand. And then UEC has their large project up north. So
you're sandwiched. You're right in between. And Smith Ranch, they produced 23 million pounds historically, right just south of you there. All right, welcome everybody to Wall Street Reporter's next Super Stock live stream, where we bring you stocks which have 10x to 100x upside potential. So these are companies going after massive multi-billion-dollar market opportunities that have multiple catalysts in place or at a key inflection point. And today we are back with Snow Lake Energy, LITM on NASDAQ, and Frank Wheatley, the CEO. Frank, welcome back to the program.
Thank you for having us.
All right. I agree with line 1996. Let's go, Frank. Let's go. All right. So let's we have some new people in the audience. I always like to start off with, if we can just get a quick snapshot of, Snow Lake's real business strategy in the energy resource space. And then we can kind of dive into the details of the major projects you have.
Sure. Snow Lake, as you indicate, Snow Lake, as you indicated, is listed on NASDAQ. We're essentially a uranium-focused exploration company, and we have two principal projects, one in Wyoming in the United States, and the second one in Namibia in Africa. Starting perhaps with the project in Wyoming. Literally as of last Monday, we completed that program, and there's multiple aspects to that transaction. Number one, we are a joint 50-50 joint venture partner with Global Uranium and Enrichment Limited, which is an ASX listed company, ticker GUE. So I'll refer to it as GUE. So we are a 50-50 joint venture partner in the Pine Ridge Uranium Project in Wyoming. That is an exploration stage project focused on uranium. It was acquired by ourselves and GUE from some private landholders. It is not a project that is well known. It was held in private hands for a number of years. It hasn't been owned by a major. It hasn't been owned by a junior or any other public company. So it's basically an unknown project. While GUE was negotiating the terms of the acquisition, they realized that there were a number of federal mineral claims contiguous to the Pine Ridge program, which remained unclaimed. So while they were negotiating, they also went out and staked a significant portion of ground. So you will see on the map that Jack has put up there, the light teal blue is the original JV project from the underlying private owners. But the darker blue are the additional federal claims that have been staked. So essentially, when we got to closing, we were closing on a project that has essentially doubled in size. And this is in the heart of the Powder River Basin in Wyoming. Powder River Basin is home to Cameco and UEC, and is the most prolific uranium producing jurisdiction in the US, and we are right in the heart of that. In addition, we are now the single largest shareholder of GUE as well.
With 20%, you have 20% of GUE, and we'll get into into GUE. So there's really, I think there's three main aspects to the company, which are, I think, the key value drivers for investors, and one of the reasons why the stock is getting interest from institutional investors in the mining space. So I think one is you got the Wyoming Pine Ridge project. You got what is it, Engo Lake?
Engo Valley.
Engo Valley in Namibia, and then of course you have GUE, and with their projects, which they have, from what I understand, they have a bunch of major uranium projects in North America, which is, I think, what, 49 million pound resource estimate according to the Australian mining standards. And we'll get into all that stuff, but I want to kind of from you get kind of the big picture, like, the company's what is kind of the goal for Snow Lake? Is it essentially to assemble a portfolio of major uranium projects so that you could participate in essentially what experts are saying is going to be a major boom for nuclear energy and obviously uranium prices, uranium properties? Is that the idea?
Yes, I think if you sort of stand back and look at it from a global perspective, world population continues to increase, global economic activity continues to increase, and ultimately the demand for electricity is going to increase along with both of those growth trajectories. You add on top of that big tech with their data centers, particularly their AI ambitions. You look at any forecast from any government authority around the world, they're looking at demand for electricity potentially doubling over the next couple of decades. Where is that electricity going to come from? That is why you're starting to see a number of policy changes around the world refocusing on nuclear. Obviously, nuclear went out of favor when Fukushima happened and earlier events, but now people are realizing that nuclear power is zero carbon, zero emissions, clean, affordable, reliable. And when you come back to the big tech and data centers and AI, what they need is reliable, baseload, 24/7 power to support all of their AI ambitions. And that's why you're seeing refocus on nuclear power.
Yeah, as we've seen, we saw, was it a few weeks ago, Spain and Portugal, had a blackout for, I think it was 2 days, complete
Exactly.
blackout, because they switched. All the Europeans basically switched from nuclear to solar, wind, and
Renewables.
apparently it's not working. And we haven't even started in the early stages of the AI, EV, crypto, because all these things, we're talking about big tech, which is, AI is just one aspect, which
Absolutely.
massive demand for electricity. Then you have EVs, right? Everybody wants to get away from, fossil fuels. Okay, well, how are you going to get the electricity to get that into your Tesla, right? You gotta, you need, and basically nuclear is, nuclear energy, clean nuclear is the only option. And I think people are realizing that, and I think even the Japanese are going back to nuclear. The Germans are going to have to go back to it. I mean, Spain, I think, was a wake up call. When you have no electricity for a couple of days, then things become more. You become more pragmatic about.
And I think what I mentioned earlier is nuclear is reliable. It's 24/7. And that's not to knock anything about renewables, but renewables aren't 24/7. So certainly from a big tech, from an internet, from a data center, from an AI perspective, they can't afford outages. Certainly not like you saw in Europe. So
and the price.
And believe it or not, nuclear is as cost effective or more cost effective than other sources of generating electricity. So the global focus is returning to nuclear. There are a number of conventional nuclear reactors being built around the world now, primarily in Asia and in Russia. But there's also what they call advanced nuclear technology, SMR, small modular reactors. There's a number of companies that are pursuing that, including one of Bill Gates' companies. So there's an awful lot of focus on small modular reactors, which will be more cost effective and timely to build, as opposed to a conventional reactor, which often takes many years, many decades, and many hundreds of billions of dollars to construct. There's a lot of focus on SMRs. How does that ultimately relate back to Snow Lake? Well, at the end of the day, uranium is the input to all of those nuclear reactors, be it conventional or SMRs. Right now, there is actually a supply deficit of uranium. And as demand for electricity, as nuclear power plants come online, there will be a shortage of uranium. What does that mean? The world needs more uranium mines. Coming back to Snow Lake, we have two very prospective projects, one in Wyoming, one in Namibia, which we hope over time we can develop into one of those new uranium mines to feed into this nuclear renaissance.
Okay, and we're going to drill down into the, no pun intended, we're going to drill down into the Pine Ridge project in just a bit. So we're going to have we're going to have a bunch of questions from the audience. Sure. Maybe in about 10 minutes we'll get to questions, Q&A from people watching the live stream. We have some good questions coming in. So in terms of Pine Ridge, let's talk about what makes this really significant. So from what we see kind of on the map here, you're between two projects. One is from Cameco, which was their Smith Ranch?
Smith Ranch, correct.
Ranch.
There's a 5 million pound per annum licensed uranium mill at the Smith Ranch, which is currently under care and maintenance, I understand. And then UEC has their large project up north. So
you're sandwiched. You're right in between. And Smith Ranch, from what I saw online, we had to Google it, but they produced 23 million pounds historically, right just south of you there, and which is big. By the way, so the uranium prices. I think LITM, what makes Snow Lake compelling is, look. And I've been a big fan of the uranium stocks for 5+ years. Uranium prices have been climbing steadily. From I think it was under $30 a pound. 5 years ago, we hit a high of over $100 a pound just last year. Maybe I'm crazy. I think we're going to get to Frank. You ready for this number? $308 a pound.
That would make a lot of projects very economic at that uranium price. That's correct.
But here's why. I mean, we've seen major spikes in uranium, right? Right now, there's not enough production. We know there's a whole backstory. Anybody that does their research, on uranium, the uranium thesis is very, very powerful. And that number, which I'm talking about, may sound aggressive, but a lot of people who are much smarter than me have been talking about $200 a pound, and nobody believed them 5 years ago. When prices were $30, prices went to $100. We have a normal pullback in the market right now, which, like you see with anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Look, just like what you saw with gold, right? People didn't believe in gold at $500 an ounce, right?
Correct.
Now what are we? Almost $3,500 an ounce.
Yep.
So these things kind of go in cycles, but let's get into so today I really want to focus on kind of the Pine Ridge project, because by itself I think that's one of the the key value drivers, which again, the valuation of Snow Lake right now is what, 30 million approximately, market cap 30
approximately
million?
Correct.
Yeah. And this thing potentially could be worth multiples of that, right? So here's the thing. The way I look at Snow Lake is you have, multiple shots on goals. One of the things we look for with our next super stocks, and we've had some major wins, stocks that went up 10x to 50x, within 12 to 18 month periods. One of the things that we look for is, again, stocks which have, they're going after massive market opportunity, which you have here. Then you have multiple catalysts in place, and the company's at an inflection point. So in terms of multiple catalysts, multiple shots on goal, again, you have these two major uranium projects. We'll talk about the others. I mean, you started off with lithium before that, and of course you have a 20% stake in GUE, which they have a 50 million pound resource according to JORC. And from what I understand, GUE, their goal, again, they're at 50 million according to JORC. Their goal is to get to 100 million pound resource.
Correct.
To Australian standards, which would, and I think they're looking at Pine Ridge as being the key element to getting there. Is that correct?
Yeah, look, Pine Ridge is right in the heart of the Powder River Basin. The Powder River Basin is the most prolific uranium producing jurisdiction in the U.S. Wyoming is the leading uranium producing state in the U.S. And I think, Jack, the way I look at it is, where would you like to be in the next couple of years as this uranium nuclear renaissance unfolds? And I think you can't forget the new U.S. administration. Everyone became cognizant of what a supply chain was during COVID. And I think with the new administration, they're now focusing on critical minerals. And interestingly enough, the new administration has now included uranium as one of those critical minerals. And the policies, the tailwinds, if you will, for Snow Lake and Pine Ridge, amongst every other uranium project, is the U.S. administration's focus on accelerating domestic production of critical minerals, including uranium, which ties back to my earlier comment that the world needs more uranium mines. And ultimately, just to segue quickly, even if all of the proposed projects in Wyoming come online, that is still not sufficient uranium to supply all of the U.S. nuclear needs. So they will continue to need to rely on countries outside of the U.S., hence our project in Namibia. A lot of people say, why are you in Namibia? Namibia actually is the third largest global producer of uranium, following only Canada and following Kazakhstan. So the U.S. will need to acquire additional uranium supplies from outside the U.S. as well. Hence our focus, our secondary focus on the Ingo Valley project in Namibia.
Okay. Hopefully we'll have enough time to talk about Ingo Valley and the Namibia project. But starting off with Pine Ridge. So basically, you have 30. I wrote some notes on. So there's 37. The project right now is 37,000 acres. So
Correct.
just for some numbers, that's about 58. I had to Google this, right? That's 58 square miles. 58 square miles is roughly, I think Manhattan is 25 square miles. I mean, it's 10 miles. So basically, two Manhattans, basically side by side. That's a big land mass. So they've done historic. So maybe you can. I'll kind of tell you my notes, but you tell the audience in your words what you found compelling. But basically, they were historically, it was privately owned. There were about 1,200 drill holes done, they apparently they came up with 140 miles of redux fronts. Right? I'm getting this from the online info, which basically points to the potential for a significant uranium resource. Right now, again, potentially these people are looking at another. In theory, they think there could be, I don't know, something like 50 million pounds potentially by Australian standards.
There is a JORC exploration target of 50 million pounds on the Pine Ridge project, correct. And there has been a lot of historical work done by the private owners. The plan going forward for the joint venture between ourselves and GUE is to do a lot of drilling. Ultimately, we would like to undertake enough drilling this year in order to potentially calculate a maiden resource estimate by the end of 2025. So that's the main objective for this year. The boys are on the ground right now, getting all the logistics set up, talking to drill contractors, setting up permitting, all of the nuts and bolts of actually getting a drilling program going. We hope to have drills on site in June, and then we'll drill through the balance of the year. Again, hopefully creating a database large enough to do the maiden resource estimate by the end of the year. That'll start to show us what the potential for this project is based on drill results.
Okay, so really, and that's what we're looking for. We're looking for, again, we have the massive opportunity, and the catalyst is going to be the drilling program that's going to be starting next month, basically.
Exactly.
So the data flow, the news flow that we're going to be getting from the drilling, and of course the assays, which are going to be coming in, I guess by the fall, and of course the idea is to have that maiden resource by end of the year, right?
End of the year is the current target, yes, assuming everything goes according to plan.
Okay, so your partner in the deal, which is GUE. Now these guys are, obviously, they're pros in the mining space, in the uranium space. So they think that there's potentially a resource. Excuse me, Nick. I just want to make sure I'm using the correct
language. Exploration target as the
target.
Yes,
we have to be very careful with the exploration target of up to 50 million pounds. So uranium right now is, let's say, I'm going to use the $100 a pound thing, which uranium is low. I think we're in the 70s right now, 80s.
Yep.
But let's say it's $100 a pound. you get to a resource of, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but let's say you get to the 50 million pound resource. So that's roughly $5 billion value of the resource to potentially, a mining company, assuming they extract all that uranium. Obviously, the value, if you sold it, again, I think the idea is you're going to go into production, but the idea is if you sold it, usually that has a value of, I don't know, was it 5 cents on the dollar, 10 cents on the dollar, net present value of what they do a calculation, right? It's like,
sure.
But it would still be in the, let's even if it was, let's just say 10 cents on the dollar to make it easy. We're talking about, $500 million potential valuation. Let's discount it by half. Let's say it's only 250 million. So, I can see a path. Again, this is not investment advice, but I could see potentially a path for this to be a 10x in terms of upside for the stock, right? So, you potentially you could have a $300 million valuation if you get to that, if you get to that resource, plus the other projects which have the blue sky, plus your 20% stake in GUE with their other projects. So there's a lot of catalysts for upside in.
There's a lot of moving parts that could add value to this company. That's correct. Pine Ridge being the principal one. There's other projects that GUE has. GUE also is the largest shareholder of a private Australian company that's pursuing a uranium enrichment technology. So we have indirect exposure to that. So using your analogy earlier, yes, we have multiple pucks and multiple potential shots on goal here. We're just, particularly for Pine Ridge, doing the nuts and bolts of getting that program going to start the program to hopefully create that value ultimately for shareholders. And again, as I said before, I think, where do you want to be in the next couple of years? I think you want to be in critical minerals with a U.S. footprint, with the U.S. administration's policies to accelerate production. So one of the things they are looking at is streamlining permitting. So if we can prove up a significant resource at Pine Ridge with our partners GUE and then move through the balance of the development phases, certainly with those tailwinds, and if permitting starts to become more streamlined, there is a path forward towards potentially developing a project here.
Yeah. So no, there's a lot of compelling aspects. Again, I look at uranium, nuclear energy as basically that's kind of one of the best ways to play, which is the kind of the generational mega trend, which is kind of the three horsemen of the future, which is AI, EVs, crypto. Those things are major consumers of electricity. There's not enough right now. There's not enough unless you add nuclear. So you're going to have nuclear. It's kind of like the people who made money in the gold rush, were the guys supplying the picks and pans, and of course Levi's jeans. Levi's was a so that company made more money from selling denim jeans to the miners than probably the gold that was pulled out, and they're still around today, right? So the opportunity is in uranium, because we don't know which AI company. There's like literally, I think today there's thousands. There's something like 10,000 startups in the AI space. 10,000 startups. Yeah. A couple of them could be huge, right? There's EV companies, all these companies, but if you want to have the way to play the full thing, this is the bet. Uranium is the bet that covers all of that. Let's get into some audience questions. You mentioned, I think, one of the big catalysts. I think one of the things that makes Snow Lake very compelling now is this new change in U.S. policy. We went from having no mining, very difficult to get permits in the U.S. Canada also you have it, but in the U.S. it's basically impossible, right? And with the new Trump administration, they're really very aggressive in opening up mining, especially for critical minerals, for rare earths, uranium. They're making a very big push to make permitting easy. I mean, they want to really get mines into production. That's the goal. They don't want to talk. I mean, really, that's the whole. And they've been very pragmatic from even from the first go around, right? So,
sure.
Question here from Chuck Norris. Is this the Chuck Norris? We have a. Okay, so he says, "Hi Frank, I'd like to know if you have any pending permit applications with the Department of Energy. If not, do you have plans to submit for permitting in the near future to take advantage of the executive order to expedite permitting process?"
The simple answer is Pine Ridge, for example, it's a little early stage. I mean, right now we're applying for drill permits, but as far as actually putting a mine into production and permits to actually produce uranium, that is a few stages of development down the road. First, we have to do drilling to prove up the resource estimate, is if it is of a size and scale that could potentially be economic. We'll continue to do drilling. We'll get into technical studies, be it scoping study, pre-feasibility, feasibility study. Once you get through feasibility study and you have an economic deposit, which again depends ultimately on the price of uranium, which I think general forecasts are certainly over the next decade, is the price has to increase because there is that structural deficit of uranium in the world. At that point, the applications for permits to actually operate a uranium mine are actually made. So it's a little premature just based on the stage of development.
Okay, we got a couple questions. The company, acquired some major projects. So we have some questions about, dilution. There's a couple of multiple people asking about dilution, things like that. I think was it I don't know how to pronounce, but basically saying there was dilution or shares were issued to acquire this major project at Pine Ridge. And I guess he's saying that the market doesn't understand, because is it dilution or is it a value add? I mean, it's because really, I mean, you want to explain that, because there was, I guess, some concerns that maybe, I don't know, there were many shares were issued. Maybe you could explain what the value of the project is, where you're getting much more than the value of the shares.
Yeah, we are what would call an exploration and development stage company. We currently don't have producing operations. We don't generate revenue. So we are dependent on the capital markets. So we do have to raise equity in the capital markets. To do that, we issue shares. So there is a factor of dilution, but we're issuing shares to raise money to acquire assets like a Pine Ridge, which we feel the value more than outweighs the potential dilution. And again, the opportunity to acquire Pine Ridge came up, as I've indicated before. It's in the heart of U.S. uranium production. It's a sizable land position, has a very substantial JORC exploration target. We also have an interest in GUE against the backdrop of the new administration. We think it has what I would call all the ingredients to potentially be a successful uranium mining project. But we need to raise money in order to undertake the drilling and all the technical studies to prove it up as an economical project in order to put it into production, to create the revenue and create the value. Another point I'll make is we still have a part of the reason, well, 2 points I'd like to make. Part of the reason of raising capital when it's available in the markets is to be prepared for opportunities when they present themselves. This opportunity for GUE came up. We fortunately had cash. We were able to take advantage of it. And I think we are far better positioned as a company with the uranium assets we have now than we were back at the beginning of the year. So yes, there's always dilution when you're issuing new shares as a non-revenue generating company, but we ultimately think the value that we can develop out of Pine Ridge will more than offset that.
Yeah, it also, you have the optionality. Like you made a very important point, Frank. One thing we should mention is, how much cash does the company have on hand right now? Because you did some capital raises. What's on hand right now?
We have about 20 million in cash, and if you look at our market cap, we're hardly trading above our cash value. And we certainly think with the uranium assets we have, and we do have a legacy lithium asset, which at current lithium prices is not economic, but when lithium prices do recover, that could potentially be economic again. We certainly think that we're undervalued. We're not getting really any value beyond our cash value for the nature of the assets we have, particularly uranium in the U.S. with the tailwinds I mentioned before.
Yeah, so this is one of the other things that we look for. We look for stocks which have, are at deep value. And again, it's a little bit hard to evaluate, these mining stocks or exploration stocks, because there's moving parts. There's unknowns, which also create that upside, because if everybody knew what the thing was worth, the stock wouldn't be where it is. The opportunity wouldn't be there if we knew, right? So, but you have 20 million in cash, so you have enough cash on hand to carry out the exploration. You also have enough cash on hand if any, really compelling opportunities came up. And look, I think one of the things that people need to understand, and I think one of the reasons that people are invested in the stock is, really the idea is, exploration companies like Snow Lake, it's all about optionality. It's all about really building up a massive portfolio of projects so that you're in a position to cash in when the market, when the market is there. So I think when uranium starts to move up, these opportunities are not going to be there. And when uranium, let's say uranium goes to 150, okay, and uranium, it could happen, right? I mean, let's say Russia decides to cut off supplies, China, anything could happen, right? Also, there's the continuing demand for it, but there's a lot of factors that could make uranium explode. We've seen the trend, right? The trend is clearly going up, right? If you just look up at a uranium chart, you look at a uranium 10-year chart, you can see what's going on. So let's say uranium is 150, you're in a great position with LITM.
Absolutely. Look, I think if you sort of stand back and look at the whole nuclear, this morning reading CNBC News, I see that Google has entered into an agreement with a company to build out 3 sites for potential nuclear facilities. Now, I think they're focusing on SMRs, small modular reactor, but I think that's 100% case in point where big tech, as I'm calling it, because of all the technology, the AI, the data centers, et cetera, they're actually putting early capital in place to start building out the supply of electricity, and they're turning to nuclear power to supply that electricity. Jack, it all comes down to electricity. There just isn't enough of it, and ultimately nuclear has to play a large part of that in order to provide. Otherwise, the Googles aren't going to be able to pursue their AI ambitions.
Right. It's interesting. Big tech, they were all about, renewable fuels, everything, solar, wind. Everybody was all solar, wind, a couple of years ago until they realized they need electricity. Now they're the biggest boosters, the biggest ambassadors for nuclear is the Googles, the big tech companies, and they have tremendous influence with governments worldwide. And I think people understand that there's we're going to need nuclear. So all the the trends are lining up. The tailwinds are in the favor of Snow Lake. I mean, everything is really lined up. You got kind of this generational mega trend. You have you got the multiple catalysts, near-term catalysts that could move the stock. You got the drilling program that's starting next month. So we're going to have some news flow, and we never know what's going to happen. And I think what's also compelling is, again, the thing with these exploration stocks is, there's a lot of companies that have a great story, but they don't have any cash, right? There's a lot of great mining. I mean, there's a lot of companies, in Canada that have, great stories. There's no cash, right? So they can't take advantage of anything, right? You have 20 million in cash, so it's enough to carry out the exploration, to create that value, and then you have optionality. If anything else comes along, and again, you have a great partner with GUE, which I think is very important. Maybe we could talk about that. Talk about those guys now. We could talk about them later. Maybe the next live stream. But their goal is to get to 100 million pound resource, and they're up to 49 million right now in North America. And I think the idea is that they want to they're looking at Pine Ridge as potentially the other 50 million for them. We get
100%. Look, I think we have upgraded our portfolio dramatically with the joint venture on Pine Ridge, and I think our investment in GUE, yes, it's a quality firm, and they have multiple options as well, and we will indirectly participate in those options through our investment in GUE as the single largest shareholder. So I think the past couple of weeks as we've locked that deal down, and now we're starting to plan the drill program. I think we have a quality asset in a good jurisdiction And I think all the ingredients are there. We just need them all to come together, and it'll be a good result.
Yeah. We got some good questions coming up here. So Buffalo Run is asking, how did yesterday's conference with, I think you were at Maxim, right? The Maxim Institutional Conference?
It was the Maximum Group. Yes, they did a virtual fireside chat on critical minerals. Again, it went very well. I think there is an audience in the US that, again, we're all on computers, we're all on our phones, we all understand the Googles and the techs. And as we read the news every day and see the Googles and Amazons investing in nuclear, people start saying what's going on with nuclear. They understand ultimately that uranium is a key part of that. Uranium in the US with the current US administration policies. So I think, as I said, I think it has a number of ingredients that once they all come together have the huge potential to create value for shareholders. Simple answer.
Look, we've seen it in the stock, right? LITM. If you look at the stock chart, again, one of the things I find compelling about it is, the stock has made some major runs, right? So this is a stock that could really move based on news flow. I guess any interesting questions? Were there any interesting questions raised by any of the institutional players yesterday?
No, what I can say is we've had a number of follow-ups who wanted to do 101s, who wanted to drill down a little deeper into, the details of Pine Ridge, for example, and some of the other assets that GUE owns, and what our plans are and what our timeframes are. But we sort of covered that in brief this morning. Our focus now is, together with our partner GUE's drilling off Pine Ridge in order to hopefully have that resource estimate. That's going to show us our progress toward the exploration target that they published under JORC.
Okay, maybe this could be the last question because we're short on time today. Chuck Norris again is asking, can we expect preliminary drilling results from Pine Ridge and Ingo Valley in May or June?
On Pine Ridge, as I indicated, we're doing all the nuts and bolts of setting up that program right now. We hope to have drills on site in June, so that's when drilling at Pine Ridge will start. We are actually, as far as Namibia and Ingo Valley is concerned, we're underway with our phase 2 drilling now. Our VP exploration is on his way over there literally as we speak on a plane. We hope to have initial results, what are we now, May, June. In the summer, I would expect initial results to start coming out of Ingo Valley, and then slightly after that, once we get the program up and running at Pine Ridge. So we need to get the boys in there. We need to get them drilling. Once they have sort of a month or two drilling under their belts, then we can start looking for results. But it's going to be the summertime.
Okay, so again, back to why people should look at I think anybody watching, or if there's new people watching, this is a stock that you want to add to your watch list. This is definitely something you want to put on your Yahoo stock watch list or whatever it is, because there is going to be a lot of news flow. There's going to be a lot of eyes on the stock, and there's going to be some real major catalysts. Like the exciting thing with mining. It's I think, look, there's two sectors that are very attractive for speculators, or for the degenerate day traders out there, which is biotech and mining exploration, because you never know because again, they're both essentially in the exploration business, right, and in the discovery business. They're in the discovery business. And when you have an active program, a drilling program, where you have a biotech, at any time there could be an announcement made that could move the stock dramatically. Like we see biotech stocks that are up, 300%. You wake up, the stock is up 300% that morning because there was some great news. Or in the mining space also, right? So if you have a major, a major result from either Ingo Valley or Pine Ridge, it could move the stock. Again, this is not investment advice. I'm not saying it, but it's the reason why people should definitely add this to their watch list, especially this summer from the results. So Frank, you have anything you want to wrap up with? I mean, I think I'd like to, maybe, since we don't have any more questions, I always like to ask our favorite questions. In summary, what would you say the top 3 reasons why investors should consider Snow Lake Energy today?
There is a shortage of uranium. The world needs more uranium mines. That's number one. Number two, we now have a very significant asset, joint venture, and investment with a U.S. footprint in the heart of uranium mining in the U.S. And number three, the U.S. administration policies to accelerate domestic production of critical minerals, in particular uranium. I think those three ingredients, catalysts, tailwinds, call them what you may, ultimately underpin the ability of Snow Lake to generate value for its shareholders.
Excellent, Frank. Thank you for your time. And let's catch up maybe next week or so if there's going to be any more news, and maybe we'll have a chance to talk about the Namibia project and GUE. And we didn't get a chance to talk about GUE's uranium enrichment technology, which is
Correct.
Ubarian. How do you pronounce it?
Ubarian.
So Ubarian, basically, we got to really unpack this. So basically, Ubarian is like, it could be a game changer in uranium enrichment technology. This is kind of a brand new technology, and GUE owns what?
They're the largest shareholder of Ubarian. They own about 21% of Ubarian, but they're the single largest shareholder.
Yeah. Okay. Chuck, well, thank you for tuning in. All right, everybody, thank you for joining us. We'll see you all on the next live stream. Frank, thank you again.
Thanks, Jack. Appreciate it. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, everybody.